Good evening and welcome to Kunzon Pile Chilling. As always, we're thrilled that you joined for a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo. This teaching tonight was given in 1996 originally, and the title of this is Transform Neurosis into Guru Yoga. So we will begin.
So today we are going to begin a process of looking at, continue the process of looking at two main and fundamental foundational teachings associated with the Buddha Dharma. What I'm talking about is the period that we've just gone through where we have examined and re-examined the bodhicitta, which is one of the main foundational attitudes and practices and accomplishments that one should gather on the path. And now we are moving towards the Guru Yoga. There are many areas in which these two subjects connect, and one has to develop the foundational thoughts, as I've indicated many times before, the thoughts that turn the mind towards Dharma, and also one has to develop the thoughts that make one understand the condition of sentient beings and the failings of samsara, or the sufferings of samsara. If one were to understand these in a logical and realistic way and go through the effort of planning and contemplating one's study, real understanding is arrived at, and to take real responsibility for that, then it's easy, or at least easier, to move then into a deeper practice of the Guru Yoga, a deeper understanding of bodhicitta, the twofold accomplishment of wisdom and knowledge. These things are much more easily arrived at when one studies the foundational teachings. So try to remember that no matter what stage you're at in practicing the path, one has to reorient oneself all the time. Many of us have realized by now that we need a certain amount of time spent alone in contemplation. And then other people notice that periodically they must take retreat. Some people notice that they have to kind of reassert their objectives, their goals, periodically. When it comes to Dharma, this is certainly the case, but the need here is more specific. Yes, you may find that you do need a certain amount of time alone. I think really that all people do. That you do need a certain amount of time out in nature, and you do need a certain amount of meditation time, and so forth and so on. But beyond that, particularly and specifically with Dharma, one needs to reorient oneself on the path by discovering and rediscovering again the faults of cyclic existence, the thoughts that turn the mind, the linking cause and effect conditions that we find in samsara. Turning the mind, this is something that one needs to accomplish on a regular basis. And there never is a time when you are actually finished with that. And so this is something that I speak about constantly, and I know that you feel that you've already heard this. I agree that you may have already had it meet with your ears, but the hearing part, well, that's a different story. We don't know if that's actually happened yet or not. Because the level of personal responsibility that I'm talking about is absolutely essential. Now, moving on from that, assuming that it does, as I have indicated, lend us to an easier transition to teachings about bodhicitta, teachings about wisdom and knowledge, or the accumulation of wisdom and knowledge, teachings about Guru Yoga. How does that actually happen then? let's move into a little bit of the understanding of the Guru Yoga and see if we can put it all together with what we understand of the thoughts that turn the mind and cause and effect, and also some of the foundational Buddhist thoughts, the faults of cyclic existence and so forth. But before we do that, before we connect some of those dots, what I would like to do is to fall back on utilizing ordinary circumstances to illustrate a point. Remember that this point is about the practice and the embarking on the practice of Guru Yoga and how to actually take that on in a way that serves you to make progress. Like any practice of Guru Yoga would automatically serve you to make progress, but you have to understand that, like anything else, there are skills and a sense of artfulness that one develops in any practice, and that's true of Guru Yoga as well. I have seen students who are inclined towards a certain kind of passivity, a certain kind of not taking responsibility for their own path, for not realizing the dignity of being on top of and taking an ethical and moral responsibility for one's path. I've seen people that are not inclined to do that in any area of their lives, then when they meet with Guru Yoga, manage to find a way to understand Guru Yoga in such a way that they become brain dead. You know, now we don't have to think anymore because the Guru's doing it for us. Baloney. That's not the way to practice Guru Yoga. That has nothing to do with Guru Yoga. That's simply you looking for another place to do what you normally do within the ordinary context of your life, but now you want to label it Dharma. So this is a fault. This is not an appropriate way to practice. And so what I'm going to do now is, through this little story that I'm going to tell you, I'm going to try to connect how it is that we practice Guru Yoga and how it is that we can move from practicing it in a faulted way or a flawed way, where we superimpose our own personal neuroses on the relationship with the teacher, where we could move from that into truly practicing Guru Yoga in a pure and strong and firm way, free of delusion and free of the problems associated with simply continuing our own personal neuroses within the context of Guru Yoga. So let's examine that. I'll tell you a little story. This is a story about something that happened that I saw with my own root teacher, His Holiness Painter Rinpoche. This was at the time when I was first recognized. Do you remember when I was first recognized? I was really the first female who was publicly recognized in this way, and particularly the first Western female who was ever publicly recognized and enthroned and put in a situation like the situation I was put into. So for this was the buzz of the Dharma community for a long time. And some interesting background on all of this was that when this happened, and I was recognized in India before the actual enthronement, when I went to see His Holiness and was recognized there, I asked His Holiness, how do you think people will accept my recognition? And he said, oh, the Tibetans will be so happy. Many of them will know the story of the first Ahkon Lhamo. Many of them will, when they hear about your other incarnations and so forth, will be very happy about that. They will be just thrilled. They respect me. They know that when I recognize someone, it's for real. They you know, he's not just a sort of fly-by-night Lama. He's got your, I don't know, I don't know what a fly-by-night Lama is. You've seen them. They're little flies, you know, little tiny flies with red robes. But anyway, he's you know, the head of the lineage. In fact, the head of all the Nyingma. So when he speaks, people listen. So he said the Tibetans will not have any problem with it. He said, probably, he said, your own peers will judge you the most harshly. And I asked him, why is that? And he basically told, I don't remember the story exactly, but it was a Tibetan story that was very much like, the story that we hear when we hear about Jesus' adventures. So he says something like a prophet is never known in their own town. But it was the Tibetan equivalent of that. You know, he was basically saying that these are people that have known you and seen you in a certain way. They won't know how to see you. They won't know how to place what they see about you in a new context. They simply won't know how to do that. And he said, plus you'll meet with a lot of jealousy. There are many American women who would like to have been recognized, or who feel that they may have been, you know, special in some way, and wish that they had been publicly recognized, and men as well. So he said that you may have trouble with your own people, but certainly not with the Tibetans. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And I did later find that to be true, really not with my own students, but more with old-time Dharma students who had been practicing a long time before they ever heard of a Western female tulku. That's one of the things that I've seen is that sometimes when you practice in a certain way without going over the foundational teachings and thinking that you're at a very high level of practice, your mind actually becomes very rigid and inflexible. Rather than really growing into its noble posture of an advanced student without preliminary teachings being practiced again and again and again, once again, the mind does become very rigid and inflexible, can't take in new information. It's sort of interesting. At any rate, I did find his predictions to be true, except there was one exception. And I was really surprised at this. This happened actually when His Holiness was here. And there was a Tibetan man who actually is very Americanized, speaks perfect English and acts in a very American way, seems very Western. And he said actually, within my hearing, that he didn't think an American woman should be recognized. He said, first of all, he felt it was improper that an American was publicly recognized like that, and that cameras were put on TV and all that kind of stuff. And then secondarily, it was his opinion that if someone was going to be recognized in that way, it should not be a woman. You know how I love that thought, don't you? So when I heard about that, I thought, oh, that's interesting. That's the first I've heard a Tibetan think that way. So I asked His Holiness about that. I said, well, no, this man has a relationship with you. He has received teachings from you. How does that work exactly? I remember asking His Holiness, how do you see that? How does that feel to you? Or what does that look like to you? How does that seem in terms of practice? What's your thought there when you hear that? How do you hear that? And he said, well, it's perfectly acceptable for someone who is even a student of a teacher that they respect well to have a difference of opinion. That's perfectly acceptable. And I said, but does it benefit him? Does it benefit him to hear that you have recognized me or have said something is a certain way, and then to go and say, well, it doesn't seem that way to me? And he said, no, he said, there's not much benefit, but there's not really what you would call a sin there either. He said that when a person accepts a guru as their teacher, theoretically they should accept what Guru Rinpoche has really given us in terms of information as to how to select a teacher. And that is, they should either respect the teacher very well academically, meaning that the teacher's academic understanding is so superior that the student truly feels they can benefit from them, or they must feel that the teacher's qualities are so extraordinary by seeing their life and seeing what they've produced and seeing what they've accomplished and so on and so forth, that they feel that they can truthfully and honestly follow that teacher, or they feel that that teacher's compassion and capacity for the bodhicitta is so extraordinary that it is not of this world, is extraordinary. And so they will follow that teacher and practice accordingly. He said that it's mainly these three ways that the students should honor their teacher and accept the teacher as their own based on those ways. The teacher does not need necessarily to have all three, but should it have at least one area where they are considered exceptional or extraordinary. And in that area, they will be highly revered and recognized by, by the other lamas and so forth. And maybe one or two ways in which they excel. Of course, optimally all three. But he said, so long as the student holds that as valuable and precious and accepts that as things that they admire and will follow in the teacher, then that's okay if they have a difference of opinion. But where it doesn't serve them is that it's contradictory. For instance, if you have developed, if you have studied your teacher and you've had a relationship with your teacher for some time, and you realize that all of the prerequisites have been met, and that is that the teacher can explain Dharma to you. There is enough of a connection to where when the teacher speaks of Dharma, you are able to understand it in a true and deep way. The teacher is able to show you something about your mind. Their capacity to teach you to grow in the bodhicitta is very strong. They're very strong in that way. They have wisdom, they have knowledge. Once you've determined that for yourself, and then you go ahead and you also practice, as you should practice, something in the direction of pure view, which means to say that you understand that in practicing the Guru Yoga, you aren't in a personality cult. It isn't about honoring this person so this person can be lifted up like a great king or queen or something like that so that they can feel good about themselves. That's not what's happening here. When you instead, when you're practicing to accomplish pure view, you realize that for you, the teacher is the appearance in the world, and this is what makes the teacher precious, of a method or a path or a means by which one can enter the door of liberation. The teacher can connect you with the path, can explain the path, can ripen and deepen the mind so that one can practice on the path, and is a spiritual facilitator of a very high caliber, and is considered to be, their activity is extraordinary or beyond what is normally found in samsara. And so you begin to, in pure view, recognize the teacher as being representative of your own true face. Your primordial wisdom nature, the ground of being that is your inherent primordial wisdom nature. That nature which is free of contrivance, free of distinction, completely empty, yet completely fulfilled and spontaneously complete. You begin to understand that this teacher is a representation of that nature in the world. And so the teacher provides the path, the means, the method, the ability to practice, connects you with that in a very extraordinary way. Once you've determined that, and the teacher becomes for you the appearance of the Buddha nature in the world, the appearance of the method or the path in the world, the appearance of the fruition or the accomplishment in the world, the appearance of your own true face in the world. Once the teacher becomes that for you, then to take an opposite viewpoint and to determine a difference of opinion, it's not a sin or a non-virtue, it simply argues with what you have already determined for yourself. And it's almost like walking 3 steps forward and 2 steps back in your Dharma practice. So it's not that you should become brain dead and that you're not supposed to have an opinion, but there's a fine line there that has to be kind of traveled, and it's very difficult to understand what that line is. Now here on the one hand, you are and have been raised to be a person who has a mind that thinks, and you have the ability to connect, correct yourself, developing that, hopefully on the path you are developing that clarity of mind more and more and more. Yet, here you find a situation where you have also stated clearly, I have found my teacher, or here is this Vajra master that I have taken teachings from, and that Vajra master has facilitated me on the path of Dharma. So how is it that I feel like I have a different opinion, and yet at the same time I have said this is the ultimate, this is the face of the Buddha, this is the Buddha's wisdom? How do I negotiate that? What's that look like for me? I mean, how do I do that? Well, let's stop and think for a moment in a way that might be beneficial. If we don't answer that question right now, but kind of keep it simmering. Here we're cooking up some Thanksgiving dinner here. We're keeping it simmering. Here's the gravy. It's simmering on low boil. So now we're back with the turkey in the oven. But don't forget, it's still on the boil. You got to keep watching that one. Okay, now withdraw from that, but still think about answering that question. And now think about this. You've noticed, haven't you? I'm sure you have, that throughout our lives we tend to repeat certain habitual tendencies again and again and again. Can we all agree on that? Yeah. We have seen certain habitual tendencies, we've seen certain patterns, certain habits, and it seems like, I mean, it really depends on how old you are, to tell you the truth, how convinced you are of this. The older you are, the more time you have had to see these things repeat again and again and again. While you're still young, you think, oh, I've only done this 2 or 3 times. Who says there's going to be a 4th, 5th, and 74th? But by the time you get to be, maybe midlife where I am, you're going, I've seen this movie before. I have seen this movie before. And you realize that these habitual tendencies kind of repeat themselves again and again and again, deeply ingrained. And then if you're insightful, the kind of person who is really insightful, you realize that you project these habitual tendencies onto the circumstances of your life, and without realizing it, will very much control situations and people in your life according to your preconceived notions and according to your habitual tendencies. The worst case scenario, or a difficult situation that you can maybe recognize this from is, let's say, a child that grows up in a house where the child is not given any dignity or any respect, and the child feels not loved or abused in some way. And so the child develops a certain understanding about that. I am not worthy, or I am not lovable, or something like that. And then goes out into their lives and tends to project some of the same information on others, where really others might be perfectly willing to love them, be perfectly willing to just do the best they can, not always perfect, of course, but to do the best they can loving them. And yet this person is unable to accept that love and sees the same outcome pretty much all the time, and actually is engaged in that outcome. So that's one situation. Another situation is that you, in the situation, for instance, of a cat. A cat is actually so strongly habituated towards killing on a level that seems instinctive, that, and from the Dharma point of view, we understand this to be habitual tendency, reinforced many, many times, life after life, karmic kind of situation. The cat will be reborn, and even if there is nothing to kill, if you know yourself, if you throw a ball of yarn across the room, the cat will go after it. Or you know what happens when a cat sees flies against a window? If a fly is bumping against the window, the cat will go after that. Anything that scuttles across the floor, the cat's after it, and their eyes get really big. And have you ever seen a cat look out the window at a bird feeder? You ever seen that? The cat goes, makes all these horrible noises like, I want those hamburgers. Give me those hamburgers. It's like, to them, it's like McDonald's in the sky, you know? These animals are so strongly habituated towards killing that even if they come into this life as a cute little fluffy kitty, those little ears and a little tail and those little feet, still in all, they are killers. And they are habituated towards that. And the first chance they get, any stimulation, such as the rolling of the ball of yarn across the floor, they will interpret as the hunter and hunted scenario. Did you know that we do the same thing? We do exactly the same thing. We are so deeply habituated in our own particular tendencies, whatever they are, that we project in the same way onto external stimulation. If we have deeply habituated ideas, sometimes they are bordering, not even bordering, on the obsessive and compulsive. Maybe not even bordering, maybe all the way in that country. Paid the toll, we're in. What happens is, once we are strongly habituated into habit, we interpret all stimulation outside as something that keys us into our habitual tendency. So what I find as a teacher and a female, for instance, many people interpret me as their mother. They think of me as being the authority figure, someone they have to answer to in that way. They can't be bad around me. A lot of times the students will, I mean, it's one thing to have, you know, your Dharma manners going. When you see your teacher, you hold that in respect, and that's a really good thing. But what I found is that I can walk into a party and kill it just like that. Because my students suddenly stop functioning, and they go. It reminds me, when I was a kid, you know, my mother said, dust the living room. So I'd be dusting the living room, having fun. I'd be dusting like this, thinking about other things like boys, you know, or whatever, and dusting and carrying on. My mother comes in the room, and I'm suddenly, you know, it reminds me a little bit of that. And sometimes they're habituated towards, I notice that some of my students are habituated towards authority figures in a certain way. And since I must exude some kind of authority, they look at me and interact in the same way with me that they do with other authority figures. And so there is this have to be good girl, good boy, or whatever, routine, and the blaming of the teacher and making all of those I'm mad at you authority figures kind of scenarios going on. There's all kinds of different gig. You know what your gig is with authority. Everybody's got one. And so they project that onto the teacher. But you see, what's really happening there is you're looking at your own habitual tendency, the way that your mind works, the way that it intersects with the time and space grid in front of you, and how you play with your own habitual tendency. What you're really seeing there is kind of like a bounce back phenomena that's actually taking place within your own mind stream. There is nothing external happening. There is nothing beyond you that is happening. There is nothing out there that determines your fate. You're looking at a kind of almost internal bubble or a virtual situation in a certain way. I mean, you can learn a lot from that kind of virtual reality situation. It's almost a virtual internal situation that's happening there. It seems as though you have these strong habitual tendencies and you project them onto an environment stimulated by just about anything. And when the stimulation looks like it's even on the same continent to a particular predetermined habitual karmic scenario that you have been going through cyclically, you'll do it again. And so many people do not have a good or honest or true relationship with their teacher because they're basically having a relationship with their own neuroses. That's the truth. That's the truth. They're having it with their own neuroses. But you see, here again is a mystery and something beautiful that you really need to understand. And I'm using a very Western way of explaining this to you so that you will understand better. That's part of the gift of having a teacher. It's part of the gift, because the teacher will show you your own mind, will mirror something. There'll be a little bounce back phenomena there, so that when you have a meeting with the teacher and something begins and you begin to feel like, well, this is a little, what's happening here? I'm beginning to feel a little itchy twitchy. Wait a minute, oh, I don't know, I'm seeing some authority figure stuff come out, or, God, that reminds me of my mother. Or men are like, oh, women do that. I hate that. So that will start to happen, and when that starts to happen, what the student doesn't realize is that that is a perfect opportunity to look at your mind. It's a gift. Of course, you can make this gift happen anywhere in your life. And actually, this is the best way to practice Guru Yoga. There's a lot of poetry and a lot of Dharma text that's very profound, that's written about seeing the Guru's face everywhere, in every person, in every situation, in every hardship, in every joy, in everything that comes to you one way or the other, seeing the Guru's face and turning adversity into felicity, therefore. And using the practice of seeing the teacher's face, the Guru's face is everywhere. Therefore, I turn all adversity into felicity because I honor that blessing, you see? So that would be a great way to practice. But what happens instead is that we project our own neuroses onto the teacher. Now, as a teacher, I'll tell you that oftentimes what happens is you have to hang back and just let the student do that thing they're going to do. Just let them spin around in space, freak out, do whatever it is they have to do. Go on, knock yourself out. And you kind of watch them go through their little, their scenes. They kind of do their little neurotic dance and their freak out and their response to this and their reaction to that and so forth. And after a while, the student will kind of calm down. It'll just, what they'll find is that it will come in their face so much that they'll have to work some of it out. And they'll also notice that pretty much the teacher's not playing. The teacher just doesn't play the game with you. Once in a while, a student has been so locked in that confusion that I have to do, that a teacher and myself, I've had to do this too, but I know I've seen teachers do this where they kind of almost like put on the chicken suit, and go in there and dance with the student a little bit, because they need to make some kind of connection. They feel kind of out in space somewhere, and they need to make some kind of connection. So even if there isn't an honest and true, disciplined, pure, responsive student-teacher relationship happening, there is the introduction to that, which is the student and teacher will kind of dance around a little bit. But you must understand, the teacher is dancing with your neuroses. That's what's happening there. You have to take, in order to practice Guru Yoga well, here's the trick. See, most people think that Guru Yoga is about giving up your will. Now you don't have to think anymore, you have a teacher. Wonderful, mazel tov. This is terrific. In fact, when you have a teacher, what that means is that you have to take responsibility. It means more responsibility, not less. The teacher is not here to blow your nose for you. Teacher is not here to take responsibility for you. If the teacher were here to take responsibility for you, the teacher could also have your enlightenment. And since that's not what you want, because the teacher's already got their own situation handled, hopefully, then you must understand that the responsibility is yours. Now, what is that responsibility then? Now the responsibility begins with recognition. Simply that. recognition. There are some fundamental truths that must be recognized here in order to stop the game of projecting your own neuroses onto yet another external object. Because that is not the practice of Dharma. That is not going to lead you to liberation. That will continue to lead you to more and more neuroses. You see? So you must play the game correctly. And so the first thing that happens is recognition. Again, it begins with the recognition of the fundamental, foundational truths that we call turning the mind toward Dharma. The faults of cyclic existence, cause and effect relationships, impermanence, these kinds of thoughts. And then the realization that in all the 6 realms of cyclic existence there is suffering. Then the recognition that there is the appearance of the Buddha, which brings the element of enlightenment and supreme realization, and the visage or face of our own primordial wisdom nature, puts that into the world. That's the Buddha. The Dharma, which is the Buddha's method, inseparable from the Buddha, like the rays are inseparable from the sun. And the result, which is enlightenment, also inseparable from the Buddha. You begin to recognize that this has in fact happened. In the world, there is the Buddha, there is the Dharma, there is the Sangha, and there is the Lhamo as representation of all 3, the condensed essence of all 3. That recognition alone puts you in the position where you have to choose between continuing in samsara and neurotic redundancy, which is what samsara really is. Isn't that a great term? Neurotic redundancy. Don't you just love that? Or duh. Neurotic redundancy. Or you can choose Buddha and Dharma and Sangha, this 3-legged stool or chariot seat, you should say, which carries us through the door of liberation, by which we travel through the door of liberation into enlightenment, into realization, the precious awakened state that the Buddha named. So we're in a position now where we make that choice. Now that choice is based on this recognition. You can't make that choice on an emotional level. Big mistake. And some people try to do that. They come to the temple and they say, I like this stuff. It's all weird. I like the colors, you know. I like the shapes. I like the material over there. Look how they built that up there. Isn't that cute? And those books, you know, I like that they don't turn this way. I like that they turn this way. It's so exotic. I think it's really cool, don't you? And then all the statues and the crystals. Look at this. This is really cool to be with the crystals. So, you know, I mean, really, I'm describing a silly mind state, but many students, when they first begin, will come here and say, oh, this stuff is so cool. I really want to do this. Okay, you're my teacher. So on that emotional level, really not much has happened. Or they might come in and have an emotional reaction. I've seen that happen too. In fact, one thing that I've seen, this is another story that you'll be amazed at. This is an amazing story. A woman once walked into the bookstore, and I happened to be there checking out the earrings, as usual. And so I was in the bookstore, and she turned around. She got immediately who I was. She had never been around Dharma before, knew nothing about Dharma, knew nothing about anything like that. And she just was like in a trance. She was transfixed. She looked at me, and then she did 3 perfect prostrations. And then when she got up and she said, I don't know what that is. I don't know what I just did. Had no idea what happened there. No idea. And then I never saw her again. And she was crying, just like, my teacher at last, my teacher, crying, this big emotional thing. And I never saw her again. Now what happened there was unfortunate. I would call that an obstacle to her practice. She obviously had enough inner purity to remember a former relationship with her teacher. Something bled through. And yet, the obstacle was that she could only in that moment of meeting relate on a purely emotional level She could not lay down the foundation. She could not make any connecting thoughts. Really, as beautiful as that story is, and as much as it broke my heart that she never came back, it really did. You should see, you know, I love you all, but I have to tell you, I have many stories about the ones that got away. She could have been very close to me. And it broke my heart that she didn't come back. But what you're seeing there is just purely an obstacle. She was only able to relate on this emotional level, and really it's not that much different from what you see your dog do. When your dog barks to go out or sits there looking at the door like that, it is just like an immediate emotional hit that you're just overwhelmed with. It's not that different from what animals do. But animals can't practice Dharma, and it's because what's needed here is to make these connecting thoughts, these cause and effect thoughts, you know, by creating the kinds of awareness and thinking that causes you to move into a deeper level on the path and causes you to get the lay of the land, to really get what's going on here. This is what's necessary. She was not able to, at that time, think of the faults of cyclic existence, think of impermanence, and that this opportunity might not come again. She was not able to think, now that I've found my teacher, I have found a way to travel the path of Dharma and pass through the door of liberation. She was not able to think like that. This is a big obstacle that arose in her path. At the same time, the blessing of meeting with her teacher again came onto the path. So this is the difficulty that we all have. But now we are here and we are in a learning and teaching situation. We're in a situation where we have time to think, we have the leisure to think, we have the ability to put two and two together. And this is how we have to approach the path. This is how we have to do this. If we rely purely on an emotional level, not much will come of the path. If we do not challenge ourselves to truly understand all of the thoughts that turn the mind, and you've had them many, many times, you can go back and re-listen to the tapes if you're unsure what they are. And we do not require of ourselves to really recognize this precious opportunity, we won't get very far. And now the recognition has to go even deeper than that. Because once we have understood that the teacher is a spiritual ally, number one, a spiritual friend, that's really an important first realization, someone on whom you can depend as a spiritual guide or spiritual friend. And then secondarily, you must understand that this reality that you are looking at when you see your teacher, when you see the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, is to be considered separate from ordinary samsaric cause and effect conditions, or separate from the wheel of death and rebirth. Because this is all the result of the Buddha's teaching, which arises from the mind of enlightenment, and like a seed, it must always create a fruit that is appropriate to that seed. So if this reality rises from the mind of enlightenment, it results in enlightenment as well. The seed and the fruit are always consistent. Then that being the case, this is understood as something different. Now you can, like that Tibetan man with His Holiness Penna Rinpoche regarding his opinion on my enthronement, you can, if you wish, waste the opportunity by just playing out your little intellectual, here's my idea, what's your idea? I'll see you as something equal to my common, ordinary intellectual mind in the world. I'll see you as that. Or you can play the game where, okay, you're the guru, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to honor you I'll learn the traditional ways to honor you. You know, I'll do like this, and I'll do like this, and I'll offer the white scarves, and I'll do all of those material things. But in my heart, in my mind, I'm pretty much just going to keep doing exactly what I'm doing, but I'll have a teacher. You know? So then, rather than gathering oneself together in order to understand something about this primordial wisdom nature, rather than trying to move further on the path of accomplishing pure view, rather than utilizing the teacher as a way to untangle some of our own neuroses, actually, and seeing the condition of our mind and how different that is from what the Buddha described when the Buddha said, simply, I am awake. I mean, the Buddha didn't say, I'm different from you. The Buddha didn't say, I am better than you. The Buddha said, I am awake. Awake to that nature that is also your nature. So supposing you could use the relationship with the teacher to puzzle that out, to work that out. It's such a fine line. How do you give rise to, or at least, shall I say, not suppress, not give rise to, but not suppress conflicting thoughts that you may have? How can you not suppress them and still utilize the teacher faithfully in the best possible way? Not as something common and ordinary that is equal to your own conceptual proliferation. Because then you could do that with anything. I mean, we do that with all of our relationships, you know? We do that with all of the areas in life that we work with. We have preconceived ideas that we play out in our lives. Why would the teacher be different then? Why would it be precious? What's the value then of having a teacher? So it becomes the student's mind, a student's responsibility rather, to harness their mind. It isn't about going brain dead. It isn't about suppressing your ideas and your thoughts and your feelings. It's about recognition between what is ordinary, habitual, definitely part of birth and death, cyclic existence, that which arises from ordinary cyclic existence and always therefore results in more ordinary cyclic existence, or that which arises from the precious primordial awakened state that is also your nature and therefore always results in that precious primordial state that is also your nature, enlightenment. You are the one that must make the distinction. So the Buddha recommends this. The Buddha says, take a long time determining your relationship with your teacher. If at first you have an emotional reaction, that's fine. You don't have to suppress that either. But don't stop there. It's a big mistake just to stop there. Because otherwise you're just doing some kind of wacko bliss ninny thing, you know? You could get that wacko over a cute little puppy or something. Or a new car. Or a new honey. You get lots more wacko about a new honey, don't you? Way more wacko about that. So, your responsibility then becomes the responsibility of recognition. You have determined that this teacher has the necessary qualities to give you what you need. You can travel on the path now. You can understand very clearly. The teacher has a way of explaining to you. And you can understand. You can hear it. Your mind is opening. It's ripening. It's deepening. Your compassion is increasing. Something's happening here, and you're able to determine that this is not ordinary, because this doesn't come from ordinary experience. You're traveling the path of Dharma, and this is precious. This teacher has hooked you onto the path of Dharma, placed your feet there, deepened and ripened your mind, provided for you all of the necessary accoutrements. Therefore, this is precious. You then must determine that this is different for you. You see, it's not up to the teacher to provide proof for you. It's not up to the teacher to convince you. It's up to you to determine for yourself, take your time, do it right, move through all the foundational teachings and decide for yourself, is this precious to me? Then if it is, treat it like it is. So in the case of His Holiness Panara Rinpoche and that man, there was no particular non-virtue there happening through disagreement, just simply a waste of valuable spiritual time. This man was doing what he always does, you know, having his opinion. So very important. He was doing his assertiveness training thing, wherever he learned that from, I don't know. Or his particular prejudice, let's say, against women or against Westerners sitting on thrones came up there. And he was, I mean, that is what it is. You know, it's not a virtue, but it's not a horrible sin. It's not a heinous crime. But how sad, though, to sit in the presence of somebody like His Holiness Panara Rinpoche and spend that time disagreeing with something that he has ordained to be true. What a stupid waste of time. It's just dumb. Don't you see? It's childish, neurotic, and dumb. And you need at that point to determine for yourself, did I choose this to be what it is? And have I gone through the entire process? And do I know what I'm thinking? Or not? And if so, it's not about being true to the guru. It's not some sort of, you're not like married, you know, and you can't go out with anybody else. It's not like that. Be true to yourself. Let this be the one, you have this opportunity. Let this be the one arena in which you do not do the little neurotic dance. Let this be the one area in which you accept the responsibility of watching the relationship with one's teacher as though one were watching a display of one's own mind on an external, you know, projection thing, like a TV. Able to learn about oneself, able to determine. And so this experience then, the relationship with one's teacher, then becomes extremely useful and extremely pure. There is no exerting of one will over the other. That's not what's happening here. It is the development of a pure understanding, free of the usual habitual tendency and contrivance that we engage in. We all do this. We all do this. I even find myself doing this. Sometimes I'll think, oh God, it's been too long since I called my teacher. I gotta call him. Which is, oh, that's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous to think like that. And then also to think, oh, maybe he'll be mad at me when I call him. Maybe it's been too long. It's so ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. Because instead you should be asking yourself, in my continuum, in my mind stream, where is my teacher? Where is that? Where is the light of my heart? Is it there? Is it free to be exactly what it can be? Or have I superimposed all my ideas about relationships on it? Is it time now, in a natural way, do I need to hear the voice of my teacher? Do I need to feel that connection again? Do I need to tell him that his efforts with me have not been wasteful? That I am carrying on his wishes, that I am doing my best to please him by benefiting sentient beings? Something like that. Where is the light of my life? That's the true relationship in there. It doesn't matter what you do on the outside. As a teacher, the thing I hate worst in the world is the student that does a whole lot of this, and none of this. It's not in there. It's not happening. I mean, and boys and girls, I hate to tell you, most of the teachers, and myself included, were not born under a rock. They know the difference. And so where's the heart? That's what it's really about, isn't it? Where's the heart? In that way, if you practice purely in that way, and I found this to be truth for me, I know that this is true personally, on a deep level. If I practice like that, then my teacher teaches me constantly, whether he is here or not. My teacher teaches me through you, constantly. Don't even go there. Thinking that now you're going to be a teacher. Don't even think it. No. I saw that little, oh yeah, I can do that. No. No, it's true. My teacher teaches me through you. I get to see, I learn so much through you. I watch how your minds play with things. I watch how you respond to things. I watch how you let go, how you get caught up. And I learn about myself, of course. Of course. And I also learn about the power of the three precious jewels. I have watched it transform lives. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Transform and save lives. Unbelievable. So I have that ongoing relationship all the time. And I really feel that that's because I'm not involved in a personality cult. I don't think that my teachers would be so pleased if all I wanted to do was to stay at their feet and gaze adoringly at them and try to get approval from them by being a good girl and, you know, a little pat on the head kind of thing. I think they are much more pleased if I am out here caring for the same sentient beings that they care for and teaching them and providing some method for them. I think that pleases them. And so the relationship is in here. And it's based on my having a responsibility to keep that alive, untainted by neuroses. It's like you have to determine the difference between something that is a truly precious jewel that can buy you everything you've ever wanted. Precious jewel. And, you know, one of those paste-on jobs, you know, those plastic with aluminum foil pasted on the back of it. Plastic jewel. It's up to you to determine the difference. And then you cannot put them on the same crown. You see what I'm saying? Once you determine they're not the same, you can't use them in the same way. Maybe you can take the plastic jobber and you can use it to adorn your ego and to facilitate your neuroses and to continue to make you so impressed with your cerebral area and to make you, you know, decorate and fancy up your habitual tendencies, and it will give you all kinds of excuses to be even more so exactly the way you are. Maybe you can use the paste-on job for that. But when you have a precious jewel that can buy you anything you want, it makes sense that you would reserve that, preserve that, protect that in your deepest, innermost sanctum, knowing that it will buy you the ultimate gift, the ultimate blessing, that of enlightenment. And so it becomes separate and apart from the ordinary games that you play in your mind, the ordinary games that you play in the world. How do you develop that quality? Through developing spaciousness within the mind. You know, Think about the cat. When the cat sees something moving, it doesn't think, oh, something's moving, better go get it. Cat just goes. Cat, it's just an instinctive, you know? And like the same thing, like I have a cockatoo. Cockatoo's natural instinct, my bird's natural instinct is to be afraid of a snake. It's its natural enemy. So we've discovered that if you put a thick enough string down and it's shaped like that, the bird will have a knee-jerk reaction to that. Will just try to get away from it, even jumping off of furniture, and hurt itself. It doesn't think, let's see, is this a string or snake? Better get away from this thing, whatever it is. It doesn't think that through. It just jumps, and sometimes will jump off a high table and hurt itself. So we're careful with that. But see, we're the same way. Now what we have to, these animals have no spaciousness within their mind. But we can develop spaciousness within our mind. And what that would look like to us is, when we see ourselves engaging in the usual habitual tendencies regarding our teacher, and there's some kind of thing going on between you and your teacher. The minute you think there's a thing going on between you and your teacher, get it. You are in the middle of some neurotic bubble and you are just looking at your own mind. It's a feedback loop. It's just a feedback loop. So if you think a thing's going on between you and your teacher, step back. Step back and say, all right, what am I doing here? Try to see what you're doing. Try to get the lay of the land and ask yourself, have I ever seen this pattern before? More than likely, the answer will be a big yes, a big, giant yes. So that's your opportunity to look at that. That's your you say, all right, that's the gift. That's the Guru's gift to me. Now I get to see what I do here. And you begin to undermine your own game through, first of all, noticing that nobody's playing but you. That's a great way to undermine the game. The minute you notice nobody's playing but you. Watch little kids. When minute, they'll be playing with complete absorption, but the minute all the kids go home, they don't know what to do. Suddenly, Ma, I don't have anything to do. So it's like that. You have to do that with your own mind. Simply stop playing and then go back and ask yourself, wait a minute, what's really happening here, since I've done this before, is I am engaging in this habitual tendency. And this teacher, the spiritual friend, is simply providing a bounce-back situation. So what am I learning? And you begin to learn and separate the laundry, Let's separate the light colors from the colored colors. And what we want to do here is determine, one is precious, and one is what I do. Just stepping back, just that, and recognizing what you do is a beautiful first step towards cultivating the Guru Yoga. Because in distinguishing between that and proper regard for the preciousness of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and for the Lhama as the condensation or elixir or essence of all three, differentiating between that and our own habitual tendency is the first really good step to pure view. But so long as the Lhama simply becomes part of the stuff that you're doing, it will never happen that way. And this amazing jewel in your life is not so useful. According to the capacity of the student. That's how the path is practiced. According to the capacity of student. And so each and every one of you has to take responsibility for increasing that capacity in the way that I've described. Do you see what I'm getting at here? And in taking that responsibility, you begin to understand that really, if you really listen to what the teacher's saying, you really listen to what you're seeing here, separate and apart from your own particular neuroses that you're playing back and forth, you will notice the only thing that the teacher has ever wanted of you is for you to be a benefactor to all sentient beings, to help end suffering, to develop yourself spiritually so that you'll really be able to provide refuge for others, to travel the path purely so that you are free of the wheel of death and rebirth and can return in a form in order to free others from the wheel of death and rebirth. That's really the teacher's only agenda. That's the only agenda. That's the plan. So that's all that's wanted here. If you're making something up, then please take responsibility for that. Speaking as your teacher, those of you for whom I am an official teacher, I can only tell you that I love you. That's all I know. And that I want to see suffering end. Beyond that, I know nothing about your game or what's happening to you or what you think. And tell you the truth, I'll do enough to get by, but I don't much care. I want to see you practice the path. I want to see you get more clarity of mind. I want you to understand your own dignity and your strength. I want you to develop and give rise to the bodhicitta, to the great compassion. And I want you to return it. I want you to, in this lifetime and in every future lifetime, transform your life into that vehicle which will benefit sentient beings ultimately and truly. That's all I want. That's what I want. Other than that, you're on your own. And whatever you're seeing is you. It's not me. I'm not playing. This is a wonderful gift to hear this. Just think about it. Because most of us have never really felt loved, you know? And then when somebody's in the world whose only agenda is to love you enough so that you can start loving others, and to do it in an organized way with the discipline and respect of the path. And that's the whole agenda here. Wouldn't it be nice if we could finally accept it? Wouldn't that be nice? But you know, we never will, so long as we keep projecting our own neuroses onto it. But let's just stop, you know? Let's be a bunch of kids in the room, and let's just look at each other and say, let's just stop. Let's just don't do that. Let's just accept that this relationship is what it is, pure and untainted, and keep it that way. Take responsibility for keeping it that way, because you can do that. You must do that. And allow that relationship to provide a light by which you can work out your own salvation, just like the Buddha taught. And beyond that, recognize that what you are seeing is your mind. There's nothing else happening out there. Not to you, not from someone else. No matter what you see, you are seeing habitual tendencies repeated again and again and again. And so Guru Yoga becomes the beginning, a way to begin to learn that. And the teacher becomes the great facilitator. And this loving relationship that is something like a mother and a child in a way, even though it's not the authority mother. It's more like, if you could understand the primordial wisdom nature that is the ground of being from which we all spring, and think of that as the great mother, then we are all the children of that. And in Guru Yoga, we can begin to practice, even in the world, even while we are still involved in death and rebirth. We take the first step. Because it's happening from my end, I'll tell you that. The only logical reason why a teacher would bother teaching students is if they recognize that in that student is the great capacity, is the great precious awakening. The teacher looks in the student's eyes and sees their own face? Will you do the same? That's the question. And that's the beginning as to how to practice Guru Yoga. Take responsibility for your life, for your issues. Determine for yourself what is precious, and be true. Be true to what you know is precious.
Thank you all. Excuse me. Thank you all for joining for this. I hope it brought you some meaning, support, and some things you can do with your life. And you will be able to watch it again and again if you wish on YouTube, as you can with every other teaching of Jetsunma's. You go to, if you're on the kbctar.org site, you can go to Kunsang Payo Choling on YouTube and find that. I just wanted to kind of fill you in on what kind of things are happening around here at the moment. We just had a lovely visit last weekend from Kempo Norgay, and he did empowerment and teaching on Chinrezig and Amitabha. So coming in January, we will have a resident Kempo, we hope, probably late January, but we'll see. We'll see how the visas and everything go. But we're looking forward to this, having someone here all the time so you can get live teachings and fresh information, in addition to the teachings that Jetsunma has given us in this form. And if you're here or around or on if you are emails, anything like that, you will know that Jetsunma is always teaching. It just looks a little different than it did back then. So, you know, we're so lucky to have lamas of this caliber with us now. So moving forward in that, we do show these teachings Wednesday evenings at 7:30 and Sundays at 11, unless there's something that interferes with that, but it's pretty regular, and they are pre-recorded, so you can go back and watch them. In addition, we have meditation that is both live in person and on YouTube. So you can also participate in a meditation that's led by one of Jetsunma's students and taught by, following a method that she's taught. So she wrote a pretty good book on meditation. So there we go. Medicine Buddha, we offer, we started doing this in COVID, and we'll probably do it forever now. It's every evening at 7 p.m. It's on Facebook Live, and it's a very, very short practice. And it is, Jetsunma condensed it, and for Westerners, for the purpose of bringing Medicine Buddha's blessings into your life and into the situations that we're all facing. So use it. Come, participate, share with people, and your prayers will get, put into the KPC prayer list, and everyone, will be praying for you as well. So that's available. And we have food offering ceremonies that are really potent in getting the merit that you need to stay on the path. She alluded to that a number of times, the whole merit phenomena, which seems to be it's the coinage. It's what you can use to move yourself forward. The merit is, I I don't know, all the positive things that you can do to build your practice and to deepen. These soaks are Monday through, they're every day, and they're at different times. So let me just lead you to the calendar and the statue. And the statue, what am I saying? On Sunday, we do it at the, we do it at the Guru Rinpoche statue. And if the weather's permitting, you know, if it's not pouring rain on us or sleeting or snowing or doing something dreadful or freezing, we're there. And we're praying at that statue. If not, we are in the temple space and praying before other images of the Buddha. So we've got them everywhere. But join us, you know, join us when you can. If you go on tara.org, you can find the calendar just about in a number of places, but easiest one is to just go on the first page, on the landing page, scroll to the bottom, and there will be a place where it says calendar, and you can click on that. It'll take you right to it. Once you get to the calendar, you can click on the event you're interested in, and it will give you the links that you can use for the practice, and also where on social media or where on the internet you can find it and what the codes are. So we hope to see you. We hope you join us. We hope you come to the temple where there's lots going on, particularly the new, it's not new. We've been doing Buddhist Relief for a long, long, long time, but it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and much better organized. So all of that is very positive in results. Tons, literally, not figuratively, of food are going weekly to a number of different hub locations where they are then distributed or offered up as served food. Either way, people are getting fed, people are getting the food that they need. We're also doing clothing drives. Right now, our big drive is for Thanksgiving, and it's pies and warm clothes. And for a very modest amount of money, you could donate sets of warm clothes to people who come to this country with nothing. Or for whatever circumstances have been in their lives, they've been here forever and they still have nothing. So we're hoping to change all of that. Hope you join us. Hope you can stay with us. Subscribe to our newsletter. Come here, meet the goats, meet the chickens, meet all the people who are farming and doing all this stuff. We'd all love to see you. We'd love to just have you with us. Thanks. And we'll see you next time. Thanks again.